So welcome everyone to this Vital Sites webinar, the Introduction to the Management Effectiveness Tracking Tool MET4. We're just waiting for all of our attendees to join. So we'll start in about a minute. This event is part of IUCN and WCPA's Vital Sites, The Journey to Marseille, a series of online events designed to show the importance of well-managed, effective, and fair protected areas around the world in safeguarding biodiversity. So I would now pass you on to our host for today, Sue Stolton. Sue, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody, and I shall share, hopefully, my screen. There we go. Hopefully that's going to, there we go. Hopefully you can all see that. So, good morning, everybody. Apparently we have nearly over 300 people registered for this event, so that's fantastic. I just wish I could see you all. Because there's too many to fit on my screen. So what are we going to be doing this morning or afternoon or evening? So the first, we're going to introduce you to the MET4, a new version of the Management Effectiveness Tracking Tool. Just a couple of housekeeping issues to start with. Firstly, we'll be recording the session. And eventually that will come up onto the Vital Sites, the website that IUCN is running, and so you can pass the link round to anybody who wanted to attend but missed the session. If you've got any questions, please use the Q&A function. Obviously, with so many people attending, we can't open the floor, or only maybe exceptionally open the floor. So we will try to answer as many questions as we go along, but also we have a couple of sessions within the agenda to stop and ask any kind of overarching questions. And it would be lovely if you could use the chat function to say who you are and where you're from, just so I can get a feeling of who's with us and where you're from. I'm sitting here in mid Wales on the edge of Snowdonia National Park. It's a typically rather grey day. What we're going to do today, as I say, is introduce you to the MET4, but please also do register for the second session of this webinar series, which is on the 11th of March, where we will focus on the new Excel tool more specifically. We'll do a run through of the tool, and also between this webinar and the next one, you will have an opportunity to play with the Excel and see if you've got any questions or concerns about running it. So that would be great. So in terms of, and here we go again. There we go, the agenda. So the session is being run by myself and my colleagues Marc, Hockings and Nigel Dudley, who have developed the MET4, and we've been involved in developing all of the versions of the MET. It's a 90-minute webinar. We're going to have a bit of background to begin with a short history and introduction to the MET, and a couple of presentations from Betchen and Duncan, and a short Q&A section. Then we'll look at using the MET, focus on the processes for completing the MET, with another presentation from Madhu Rao from WCS and Anthony Dancer about using SMART as an evidence base, and finally another short Q&A session. Great, so I'm going to get started. Hope you're all with us, and yeah, we've got well over 140 people with us so far, so that's amazing. So, oops, this way. The MET history and development. So I suspect most of you are familiar with this, and I suspect a lot of you have already used the MET who are on this call. But MET and a lot of other of the systems of management effectiveness came out of this framework for management effectiveness that was developed 20 years ago now by IUCN's World Commission on Protected Areas, who developed both the definition of what a protected area is and this framework, which looks at the elements that you should assess or try to assess when looking at management effectiveness: the context of a site, its planning, inputs, processes, the outputs, and most importantly, the outcomes. And we'll come back a bit to the issue of outcomes, because that was always one of the, I guess, gaps in MET. And why do we do PAMI? Well, it's to help us manage better, adaptive management, also to help reporting, promote accountability and transparency, help with the allocation of resources, and build a supporting constituency for all of those involved in and around the protected area. And I hope that what we've been doing with the development of the MET4 further helps you with those purposes of evaluation. And I think particularly we'll come back to reporting, because there's definitely been some advances in that. Oops, going the wrong way. So, a short history of the MET. The MET was originally developed in 2002, so yeah, 20 years ago. It was developed for the World Bank WWF Alliance on the forest conservation and sustainable use, and they had an effective management target, and they wanted a kind of easy scorecard type tool to assess their project. But once we developed the MET in 2002, it became clear that a lot of people were interested in such a simple tool, an easy to use tool, and it kind of developed from there. So in 2005, and then a revised version in 2007, we developed a MET that could be used across all biomes, all protected areas, really across the world. It was a Word version, the 2007 version, and that's basically the version that people have been using and adapting ever since. And then in 2016, again with WWF and partners, we developed a handbook. We've learned an awful lot about how people use and adapt the MET, and we wanted to share some of those best practices. So what has happened with the MET? Well, it's become the most widely used protected area management effectiveness tool worldwide. We know, and I think there's an awful places where it's a lot of places that we don't know where it's been used, but we certainly know that it's been used in well over 2,500 protected areas in at least 127 countries worldwide. And it's been used as an introduction to PAMI in about 65% of all the countries around the world. Certainly it's helped identify management processes critical to success, and there's been an awful lot of research and papers that have used the MET's results, and its use to adaptation is increasing. But all of this was based on the sort of back of the 2007 version, a rather old version, as we say, of the MET. I'll get my mouse right this morning. So, I mean, why has it been so important? Well, I mean, initially it was translated into multiple languages, and I think that really helped ensure that a lot of people got to use the MET around the world. Most importantly, really, is that it was picked up by the funders, and a use of the MET, or at least a version of the MET, became obligatory for all GEF projects and World Bank projects in protected areas, and that really obviously helped with the uptake in a major way. It's also been adapted by many protected area agencies around the world, from Namibia to Indonesia, and we'll hear of at least one example from Bhutan in a minute, and also by various regional protected area initiatives. It's also been adapted for many purposes, including for Ramsar sites. So why new MET? Well, as I say, the 2007 version, which is the one that everybody was using, was a Word document. It was just kind of out there on the web, and it wasn't that easy to use. And also, there's been so much in the 20 years that the MET's been in existence. There's been so many innovations and implementation in management issues, and obviously in computer functionality. So really, this version was getting out of date, and it was time for a change. Oops. So I'm going to stop here for a moment and stop sharing my screen, and we'll go over to a recorded short session introduction about using the MET in Bhutan. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dichen, a PhD researcher at the University of Zurich. And while I was working at the Forest Department in Bhutan, I was the focal in charge for the development of Bhutan MET+, along with the equilibrium research and the WWF Bhutan program. And now I'm going to present to you some of the lessons that we learned from the development of MET. So first, let me give you a brief background on the evolution of Bhutan's protected area system. So coinciding with the establishment of Bhutan's first development plan, the BA system was initiated in the 60s as wildlife reserves. Then in 1983, the early protected areas were gradually converted into national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, conferring them greater levels of conservation. Then this network of protected areas was further revised in 1993 to make it more representative of the various major ecosystems of the country. And a series of biological corridors linking the protected areas were established in 1999, and they were further realigned in 2008 to shape the current protected areas network in Bhutan. So this is the present network of protected areas in Bhutan, which is composed of 10 protected areas and 8 biological corridors, which is equivalent to a little bit over half of the country. And since the establishment of protected areas network, many management plans were developed, revised, and implemented, while many could not also be implemented, mainly due to lack of both financial and human resources. So it was unclear whether protected area management achieved their conservation goals, and the need to assess protected areas came in light in the early 2000s. And the first such assessment was the assessment of 4 protected areas of Bhutan using the WWF's rapid assessment and prioritization of protected area management methodology. However, after 2003, there was no assessment carried on, and despite the need was felt, but this eventually led to the development of MET in Bhutan. So in 2015, the Nature Conservation Division of the Forest Department initiated the development of a tailor-made MET for Bhutan. And in collaboration with Equilibrium Research, the Forest Department conducted a series of regional and national level consultation workshops to draft a MET for Bhutan. This draft Bhutan MET Plus was then further piloted into 5 protected areas before it was eventually finalized. And following finalization, more than 100 forest staffs were trained to conduct this self-assessment. And eventually we conducted an assessment of all the protected areas in Bhutan using Bhutan MET Plus. So from our experience, we felt the need to adapt the threat assessment sheet in the basic MET. And that is basically the need to segregate current and potential threats to further identify if these threats can be classified as low, medium, or high. And aligned with the first lesson, we also felt the need for an additional assessment sheet in a national context to be of more relevance. So this is basically to bring clarity to the medium and high level identified threats from the threat assessment sheet. And this assessment sheet also proposes management actions as to how these threats could be tackled over time. And this would establish baseline information of threats as well as management actions, thereby enabling the monitoring of mitigation measures over time. And the third lesson was that in order to interpret MET in the context of Bhutan correctly, we felt there was a need for a guidance note. So to correctly identify whether a threat was high, medium, or low, there's a need to explain what these mean in the context of Bhutan. And this would actually guide the conduct of assessments by the locals. And in fact, we even developed such guidance notes for some of the multiple choice questions wherever we felt it was needed. And we also felt the need to incorporate questions that have become relevant at the time of drafting the methodology for Bhutan. For example, like questions on topics such as climate change and transboundary conservation were not there in the basic MET, and we included them for the Bhutan MET Plus. And in fact, we also made some changes to some of the existing MET questions to be more relevant in the context of Bhutan. And mainstreaming the timely conduct of protected areas assessment in the management of BAs is very crucial. And oftentimes such assessments are project-tied and likely to be discontinued afterwards. And in view of which, we mainstreamed this assessment of Bhutan's protected area after every 5 years, and to produce a state of parks report in the management of Bhutan's protected area. So therefore, the mainstreaming of such assessment in the respective countries of protected area management is highly recommended to ensure their continuity. And in Bhutan, we are working towards an effective system of protected areas management. And with this, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Oops. Fantastic, thank you. I shall just share my screen again, and do please remember, if you've got any questions, to use the Q&A function on Zoom. So I'm now going to pass over to Nigel, who will do the next short presentation. Oops.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So the new MET4, we've just launched the 4th version of the MET. We'll be describing that this morning. And for the first time, we've actually got it onto a permanent site. And the funny thing about the MET is that although it was developed by WWF, it sort of sat there out in the open, being used by many people, but without much backup. We're now very pleased that the MET4, all the supporting documentation, and an increasing level of material can be found on the UNEP World Conservation Monitoring Centre's Protected Planet website, and I urge you all to go to that. Supporting documents include videos. There's a long video by Marc, who'll be speaking more tomorrow, but also today, explaining exactly how to use the new Excel version. There's a guide to the MET4, which we published at the end of last year, and which over the next few months we'll be incorporating into a new version of the MET handbook during this year. And you can see the link there. Next slide, please. So the content, I mean, there's nothing desperately new. We built on what we did at the end of 2019. A group of us got together in Singapore, and we started the process of revising MET. And we really built on adaptations made around the world. MET is open source software. Lots of people have taken it, used it, shaped it, thought about it. So lots of good thinking in there. The kind of thing that Dechen has just described in Bhutan. People haven't taken it as something set in stone. They've adapted it. And what we did was look at a lot of the adaptations that have made in Bhutan, in South Africa, in Indonesia, in other places, and on the work that the Global Environmental Facility has used, and pulled together a new version based on that. One of the big changes is we've given a greater emphasis to outcomes. The first MET and the early versions of the MET weren't really designed to measure the outcomes. They were looking at the management processes, but and capacity and things like that. But there was a single question saying, is the park actually working? And many people, and we weren't really expecting when we first did it that it would be used so widely. But as it has been used widely, we realized that it's quite important that there was a real need to have more emphasis on outcomes. So there's additional worksheets allowing for detailed assessment of community relations, for example, planning processes, conditions of natural and cultural values, key species and habitats. So more emphasis both on the biological, the ecological effectiveness of the protected area, but also how local communities are interacting. Dechen mentioned in her presentation that climate change wasn't part of it, because when we first started the MET, it wasn't as big an issue within protected areas. It wasn't discussed about as much. New questions that we've added, there are more questions to the MET. Climate change, particularly staff security. There's recognition that in many protected areas, staff are under great threat, under pressure, and issues of connectivity. Is the protected area just an isolated island, or is it connected into a wider wider system. And we also reordered the questions for a more logical flow. The MET is supposed to be quick. It's supposed to be something that doesn't take a huge amount of resources. So we don't want to have too much, because it's already takes a couple of days to do it properly. So we don't want to add too much more material, but we realized there were some things that really needed to be included. Next slide, please. So in terms of functionality, we also realized that a Word version was out of date. And so we built on an Excel MET that was developed by KfW, the German state-owned development bank, for assessment of their projects. And we used, we developed an Excel system, which both makes it easier for you to fill in, people to fill in, because it's online and it's automated. It also means that there's automatic presentation of results, so it's quicker to report back. Importantly, it stops people missing out parts of the MET. One of the big problems we had was that people focused on particular issues, but didn't, for example, look enough at next steps. You can't do that anymore. You've got to fill in everything. And all the MET needs have to be, so all of the MET needs to be considered and completed. Otherwise, the system won't let you go ahead. So that's very briefly the new MET. I'll now pass back to Sue. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel. So I'm going to walk through the new MET in a little bit more detail, but just to remind you that we do have this second webinar, which Marc will really go through the Excel in great detail. But just to let you know where we are, well, all of the elements that if you've used the MET before and you're familiar with are still there, just hopefully in some places in a little bit more detail and a little easier to use. So we always had the data sheet at the beginning of the MET, which has basic background information on the site, identification of the main values and objectives, which is particularly important because the assessment is then made against those values and objectives. And this is now all on an automated sheet for information to be filled in, for any comments and notes, and the guidance is included within the sheet. The threat assessment is a little bit more detailed than it was before, and this is very much building on the lessons learned from Bhutan and other places. The threat categories remain the same, using the kind of standard threat categories, but there's more room for description of the threats because these are standardized threat categories. And obviously that's an issue with the MET as a whole. It's a generic tool which can be used, as we said, anywhere in the world and in any biome. So it obviously is on the generic side. So here we give a lot more room to describe how a specific threat impacts your site where you're filling the MET in. But it also looks at both the extent and the severity of threats. And there's room to include more information on the sources of the information that you're using to complete the threat assessment and any management actions that need to be undertaken to improve management. I think, as Nigel already said, you know, one thing that we really wanted to encourage is that all of the MET is filled in. The MET, as we said, was designed to be used over time, to be used multiple times, but it's obviously not always going to be used by the same people. So the more information that you can put into the MET, the easier it is for the next people who come along and do the next round of the MET. So I'm not going to go through in detail all of these questions, but as you know, the MET has always been primarily based around multiple choice questions. There were 30 questions, there are now 38 questions. Most of the questions remain the same. In some places, we've updated language a little bit or made things clearer. We have done a bit of reordering, but the guidance that's provided on the website that Nigel just talked about on the Protected Planet website, and eventually the MET handbook clearly walks you through each of the questions and says what the number of the question was in the previous MET. So if you are transferring data or want to continue using the MET and have continuity between METs, that's fairly easy. The additional questions Nigel mentioned around climate change, but we've also broken up some of the final questions on objectives where we lumped together values of cultural and biodiversity. We've split those into individual questions, which is why it's gone up to 38. But it is still the basic, basically the same. So don't panic if you've been using the MET for a long time and want to continue using it and think that we've developed a whole new system. We haven't. It's just hopefully an easier one to use. This is a kind of summary of the questions, and when you do use the Excel, you'll see that this summary builds as you develop your MET, and also here you can see the links back to the management elements of the WDPA, of the WCPA management effectiveness framework that I talked about in the beginning. So as I said, the multiple choice questions has always been the foundation of the MET, and they're just now the same but laid out in a slightly different way. To begin with, we ask for, if you are opting out of the questions, for the reason why you're opting out of the question, which I think is important to say. That the MET is a generic system. We think that nearly all of the questions are relevant for just about every type of protected area, every governance type, every biome, every country. But there are a few questions. There are some questions, say, specifically around Indigenous people, and obviously not all protected areas have Indigenous people within them. So there are a few places where you can opt out, but it's good to give a reason why and an explanation. So there's the theme, there's the basic question, and then, as usual, there's the 4 options of answers to the multiple choice questions. The reason why we built the MET the way we did all those 20 years ago was to try and provide a short and fairly simple management effectiveness assessment system, but make it as detailed and as useful as possible. And having the 4 possible answers to the questions, I think, has really helped in guiding what is poorer practice to better practice of management, rather than just saying management is fair or poor or weak. We give the descriptors behind the scoring. But of course, again, it's generic. It might not be always that easy to fit exactly your conditions into to these questions. So the more that you can work through the MET and look at it if you're using, and think about providing and developing localized guidance, the better. And that's very much what we did in Bhutan, developing local guidance for use. Please, as I say, you have to fill out all the sections before you're allowed to move on. We've got a detailed section on the evidence and the justification for the answer that you're given, actions for improving management, and a little bit more information around the information sources that you're using to respond to the questions. And that's trying to develop a better evidence base around the MET. We have some optional additional detailed sections on outcomes, on values, species and habitats. Only really possible to do those if you have the data available, but we wanted to build in an option to have more information on outcomes, which was always one of the, I think, criticisms of the MET, that there wasn't enough on outcomes. I think, and I hope, one of the things that will be most appreciated in the new MET is the dashboard, which instantly will provide you with an overview of the scores. Obviously, this uses the functionality of Excel, so it uses Excel diagrams. So we have the results can be shown in various ways, spider diagrams and other types of charts. It's always important when you're presenting the MET results to think about the audience that you're presenting to. And sometimes this kind of diagram can be a bit off-putting. So think about who you're presenting to and how you present them. But the message that we've always wanted to promote with the MET is that you present the scores kind of around the themes of management effectiveness. One overall score doesn't really tell you much about management, but if you break these down into the planning, the inputs, the outputs, the processes, the WCPA framework, then you get a much clearer picture of management. But as I say, I think this is a very useful new element to the MET, and hopefully you'll find it a useful addition to the tool. The other very useful addition is that the MET automatically generates an action plan. So when you're going back and filling each of the individual multiple choice questions and putting what actions you need to undertake, these are all automatically generated into this form at the end. And then you can build that into a much more detailed action plan. Who will do the actions, who is responsible for them, when do they need to be done, what budget is required. So again, a very new element for the MET, and hopefully something that will help the tool become a really useful tool in terms of adaptive management. Doing the MET is only the first step in protected area management effectiveness. It's then pulling out the actions that you need to take, and then obviously undertaking them to improve management. That's so vital. So hopefully this is a major addition and useful addition. I'm going to stop there again, and now we have another short presentation. So I shall stop sharing screen. Thank you.
Okay, if everyone can see that. So this is when you open download the Excel file from the WCMC site, it'll come labeled as a MET4 master file. And it opens like this. The first time you open it, it's very important that you enable the macros. You'll get a security warning, and you have to enable the content of the site. The Excel tool runs on a whole series of macros in the background, so it's very important that you open that. We are also conscious of the fact that people will want to complete a MET form for multiple protected areas, and in order to try and help you preserve a blank master file rather than corrupt it and have to empty out a file, we've set up a system where you can, once you open the master file, you can save a copy under a new name that allows you to identify that site. So the first thing that you want to do is fill in these first parts of the opening page. So what country you're from, a name for your protected area, and we've suggested also adding a year so that identifies the assessment, and then you can put in your name or the name of the person coordinating it. And when you've done it at that stage, if you hit save, it will bring up the dialog box, and you can save this file, and it's automatically filled in the name of the park that you gave. And so that now has created a copy while preserving this master file. I'm just going to have to stop sharing for a minute because I'll close this down, but don't save the changes. So if you hit don't save, then that will have kept that file intact. And it creates, if I can find it, and open it. So hopefully you can see the Excel file again now. Again, you've got the security warning you need to enable the content, but this is now the new file with the new file name. And so that allows you to generate many MET files while keeping your master copy blank. I'm not going to go through a lot of this now because the next webinar in this series, which I think is on the 11th. Is that correct, Sue? Yes, she's nodding her head. We will go through this Excel file and the use of it in a lot of detail. But just to show you, there's a series of different work sheets across the bottom, but there's navigation built within the form itself. So if you go to the introduction, that tab at the right, this basically gives you a quick guide to some of the best practices that we'll talk about to take you through how you could go about completing the MET. You can go to the dashboard that presents the results. At the moment, this is all blank because we haven't filled anything in. But also from the introduction page, you can go to the first thing where you need to complete data, which is the protected area attributes page that Sue talked about. Again, I'm not going to go through a lot of detail here. What we've done is lock these forms except for those fields where we want you to enter data. So that is to make sure that the tool doesn't get accidentally changed. So again, you can type in your data here. And in this case, you can add notes as well. If there is help files, help information needed, then that's available there. And that allows you to complete all of that. And then you can move to the next field, in this case, the threat assessment. As I said, I will be going through this in detail at the next webinar. So that's probably enough now. You can download the file, you can have a look at it and have a play around with it ahead of the next webinar. But that hopefully is enough to get you started in opening the file. So I'll stop sharing there and pass back to Sue.
Thanks, Mark. And I've just put in the chat box the link to the Protected Planet site, where you can find both the link to download this Excel file, but there's also some additional guidance there, and there's also a short video that Mark has done sort of repeating that information on opening the MET. We're now going to go over to the presentation, sorry, from Anthony and Madhu, which I think Ruchir will load up for us. And also,
sorry, so are we going to? I think it's the Duncan.
Oh, it's Duncan. Sorry, I'm getting my order completely wrong. Yeah, sorry, yeah. It's Duncan's Duncan's presentation. And I was just going to ask Ruchir, could you pop up a link for the next webinar as well, so people who want to register for the next webinar can find that link easily?
Sure, I can do that.
Thanks. So over to Duncan's presentation, sorry.
Hi, my name's Duncan McRae. I'm one half of Park's work along with Callie DeMeyer, and we've been asked to give a brief presentation on our experience using the MET4, which we trialled with the parks of the Dutch Caribbean. I'll give you a very brief introduction to the context of the parks that we worked with. So the Dutch Caribbean's made up of two distinct sets of islands. You have St Martin, Saba and St Eustatius, which form the Windward Islands. And then you have Aruba, Curacao and Bonaire, which form the Leeward Islands. They're all biologically diverse, and the Leeward Islands are dominated by arid landscapes, and the Windward Islands are a mixture of moist forest and drier zones as well. They all have coral reefs and a variety of other habitats, and they are protected with parks. We have 11 parks in total. There's 5 terrestrial parks and 6 marine parks, including the largest coral atoll in the Caribbean basin, the Saba Bank. So the background to the pilot that we carried out, we were contracted by the regional network of protected areas called the Dutch Caribbean Nature Alliance to complete the MET analysis at request of WWF Netherlands. And we had data from the long-term management success effectiveness evaluation that we could use to complete the detailed Excel questionnaires that were included with the MET. Now, we'd actually started to use the MET3 for the Marine Park on St Martin, and we'd used the management success data to complete that one. And just after we'd finished, we took part in a Vital Sites webinar, and we were offered MET4 to trial for the remaining parks. So we sat down and we had a really good long look at MET3 and MET4 and compared them, and we decided that MET4 was a significant improvement, and it would be a great time to actually sit down and trial the MET4 with the parks that we had using the management success data. So the actual process itself, and in terms of our experience, it took myself and Callie 8 hours each per park to finish or complete the meta-analyses. And there was a gap, which I'll come to in a minute. And while we were doing it, we also completed a mini report with observations and quite detailed recommendations for each question and how we found working with them. So in terms of the outputs, we found that the number that resulted from all the various analyses created a focal point for the people receiving the MET4 spreadsheets, and people would really focus down on the number. And without any prioritization, we found that was quite an uncomfortable place to be with some of the managers of the parks. Secondly, the area graphic we found quite hard to interpret effectively for the park managers who were getting these sheets delivered to their doorstep. Also, we couldn't go ahead and complete the sections on the status of the resource. So that is, you know, the condition and the trend of the reefs, seagrass beds, mangroves, or forests as we'd identified, because we found that quite often the information wasn't there and it couldn't be relied on to actually show what the condition of the resource was and which direction it was heading in. So we couldn't complete the state of the resource part. The whole process did really nicely highlight gaps in local understanding. It also highlighted issues with global databases, which you referred to, such as the World Database on Protected Areas and the Ramsar databases, and those held information that was in some cases very out of date and very incorrect. And we found it was actually a really useful addition to have the actions to improve management sheet at the end, which captured all the data you've been putting in and came up with a really nice list of actions that could form the basis of an action plan or a basic management plan for the parks. So that's a very brief summary on the work we did. If you'd like any more information, please don't hesitate to get in touch or have a look at our website and get in touch with us through there.
Fantastic, thank you. The ability to do the field testing with Duncan and Carly was really useful, because changing over a Word document to an Excel is much more complicated than I think we thought when we started. So there's a lot of functionality issues that you needed to sort out, but also making sure that the new questions and the additions that we'd developed actually worked and were useful. We've got a few minutes now to answer some of the questions that have been posted, and I have certainly 3 things which I thought I could cover, which is about stakeholder involvements, comparisons between the old and the new MET, and about the threats assessment, and then I might ask Nigel and Marc, or if they've got anything to add. And please, if you've got any questions for the other people presenting, do post them on the Q&A. So just probably starting from the back, in terms of the threat assessment, I will just share my screen again, but the threat assessment is reported to, specifically And if we look up here in the dashboard, so you can see that the severity and the level of threats is brought out in the dashboard, but also the new threat, the new MET has a specific question on threats, which links back to the results of that more detailed threat assessment, and where you can then also put in actions which go into the action plan. So hopefully the threat assessment is much more coherently incorporated into the whole MET than it was before. In terms of using stakeholder, how you get stakeholder engagement into the MET, that's really about process and how you decide to run the MET. The MET is designed really to be used by whoever is managing a site, but you can certainly go wider to get feedback into filling in the MET, or you can fill in the MET and take results out to stakeholders to talk through their different experiences. We did that with the MET in Bhutan, but also there's some very good work that Fiona Leverington did in Papua New Guinea, really using the MET in community areas, and really looked at how you need to change the language around how you present the MET and do the MET. It's still the basic functionality is there, but in different contexts, you know, you may need to use the MET, explain the MET in different ways. And just briefly on, as I say, the comparison, as I said, we have slightly reordered the questions within the MET, but that's clearly outlined. At the moment, there's a Word document on that Protected Planet site with detailed guidance on each question, on getting started, and where the question numbers have changed, and that will eventually be incorporated into the new MET handbook, which should be out later this year. Marc, Nigel, or anybody else, would you like to say anything? Pop your hand up if you would. No? Great silence. Would anybody else want to say anything? If not, we could. Sorry, Nigel.
Yeah, I think maybe just very briefly saying a little bit about how you might fill in the MET. There's been various questions about the process. And I mean, one of the things we've learned over time is that the value of the MET depends a lot on the way it's done. I mean, it sounds obvious, but it can be something that you fill in very, you know, one project officer fills in very quickly on their own, can be done very quickly, but it often doesn't mean very much. A real MET process, as I said, takes a day or two. We very much recommend doing it in a group by consensus, and then every question is talked about, argued about. It's quite hard work, and you really sort of think through the answers, and often the answers change as people really think about, you know, and discuss. And of course, ideally, not just protected area staff, but also local people, local stakeholders. So I think just a little bit about the process is quite important. Thank you, Sue.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the second part, which is very more about the process. And we wanted to do a specific focus on the kind of evidence and how you think about the sort of evidence that you use to make the judgments when completing the MET. So, you know, thinking about what evidence you have and how it helps in decision making. In the multiple choice questions, we've put in the Excel file an awful lot more on the sources of evidence that you use for completing the MET, whether that's research and monitoring or specific documents like planning documents, staff experience, or external opinion, community, or traditional knowledge. We've done this because we also think that the MET, as well as helping show the direction of management, can also show the gaps where information is. And I think, you know, Duncan mentioned this, that for some of the more detailed elements on outcomes, there just simply wasn't the information available at present to fill in the MET. And I think it's important to not only know what management actions are needed, but also to understand, you know, if there are deficiencies in information. And obviously we realise that, you know, a lot of sites do not have the resources to do a huge amount of monitoring and research, but it's still useful to know the sort of information that's being used. And one of the things that we're trying to look at more, and will be noted in the next presentation, is how we can link up different types of information resource in between different tools that people use. So, you know, why is the evidence important? Well, it is important to focus the assessment on available data. It obviously gives the results an awful lot more rigour. It's much easier to present the results to whoever you need to, funders, governments, to show that the results actually build on the information base available, not just one person's opinion. It certainly, by putting more information on evidence, helps when doing repeat assessments. As I said, that's the main purpose of the tool. One of the main purposes of the tool is to be used multiple times to track change and to show differences in management and hopefully improvements in management. But it's unlikely that the same people will be doing the MET each time. So the more information you can put in and the more information on the results that you used can help understand previous assessments. And obviously, as I said, it helps identify where there are gaps in evidences, but also possible redundancies. You know, if you are have some kind of major monitoring or research that doesn't seem to link into something like the MET, you know, maybe there's a reason for that. So our next presentation is really quite exciting for us in a way, because we're trying to see how we can pull together various different tools that more and more people are using around the world, and amalgamate them and their results. So the next one, and I'll get it right this time, is from Madhu and Anthony, and Ruchir, if you could pop that up, that would be fantastic.
Hello everyone, my name is Madhu Rao and I'm with the Wildlife Conservation Society and a member of the IUCN World Commission on Protected Areas. I will be co-presenting with Anthony Dancer from the Zoological Society of London. Our presentation today will focus on the potential for improving the quality of METT assessments using evidence from SMART, and how alignment between these two widely utilized PA management tools can help close the adaptive management loop and ultimately enhance the effectiveness of PAs. It is broadly accepted that protected areas need to be managed for effectiveness. METT and SMART are widely adopted across many countries and are viewed as two separate tools for PA management operating at different scales, but with the same goal of enhancing PA effectiveness. In practice, despite implementation at scale, both tools struggle to close the loop. The purpose of METT is to assess the status and trends of management in protected areas and provide information to improve management. A common criticism of METT is that it's a subjective, non-independent self-assessment and that it is inadequate as an outcome measure. Linking the assessment to more measurable data can thus provide greater confidence in the assessment. In parallel, SMART implementation will not improve protection where improved basic enforcement capacity, equipment, and infrastructure are required. Putting the two systems together could be a huge step forward for improving adaptive management through evidence-based decision-making and ultimately to more effective PAs. The spatial monitoring and reporting tool, SMART, is a suite of best practices aimed at helping protected area and wildlife managers better monitor, evaluate, and adaptively manage enforcement activities. It was developed by the SMART Partnership, a consortium of global conservation organizations, and combines powerful software tools which enable monitoring and management with capacity building support and standards. SMART has grown rapidly since launch to become the leading protected area management solution globally in both terrestrial and marine environments. Its application in the marine realm is expanding rapidly. It is now used in over 850 sites in 65 countries, with at least 17 countries adopting SMART as their national tool for PA management. Over to you, Anthony, for the next slide.
Thanks, Madhu, and hi, everyone. So this is broadly how the SMART approach works. Essentially, it's structured around an adaptive management cycle following the logic you can see here. To talk you through that cycle, so it starts with rangers on patrol who use standardized methods to collect data on where they go and what they see while they're on patrol throughout conserved areas. So that includes observations of wildlife and threats to wildlife, but also patrol results, so things like arrests. The data then entered into a software platform called SMART, which includes a series of tools for mapping and analyzing and reporting and sharing those data. The results are then fed back to frontline staff and then used to evaluate and adapt patrol strategies, at which point new patrol targets are set and the cycle begins again. So that's how the cycle works in theory, but SMART, like the MET, has struggled to close that loop. So we're working on a few methods to help sites get to adaptive management. And one of those is through this work to align SMART more closely with other common tools like the MET. With that in mind, these are some of the typical data from SMART which could be used to inform MET assessments broadly across three main areas. So wildlife observations, threats to wildlife, and enforcement responses. And then you use SMART software to run queries which correct the survey effort, which gives you an indication of spatial and temporal trends in those attributes throughout conserved areas. And the idea is that through closer alignment between SMART and the MET, these outputs could be being used to inform and to justify MET assessments, providing that all-important link to quantitative independent outcomes and threat data that assessments are sometimes lacking. But that's not the only benefit of greater alignment. There's also an opportunity to make MET results more relevant and more useful for PA decision-making. And on the SMART side, to ensure that the evidence that's being generated is used beyond day-to-day patrol management. And I guess also in general to improve confidence in both tools, and particularly to learn from each other to help sites move from monitoring and reporting to actual adaptive management. So how will this work in practice? Well, it's still early days, but we're currently working through a process of going through each MET question and mapping which specific outputs could inform that indicator. And then we'll develop a set of queries which we run in SMART, which would automatically generate the available evidence for each indicator, along with confidence scores and guidance to help reviewers interpret that evidence. And then finally, just to reiterate that most of what we've discussed is about how alignment will be beneficial for management at site level, yet there is a broader context to this work. So as we all know, management effectiveness will be a core component of the CBD's post-2020 framework. So we're going to need efficient methods for monitoring management effectiveness at scale, aligning tools like SMART and the MET, which both ultimately are aiming to increase management effectiveness, could provide a means to streamline reporting of effectiveness and outcomes across sites. I'll end it there, but thanks to all the people involved in this work and to Madhu, and please get in touch if you have any questions.
Fantastic, thanks. And I really do think that's we could really see a major development between the MET and the SMART. I can see Marc and Nigel have been working very hard answering the Q&As that have popped up. And if you particularly have any questions on SMART and how we can link that in with MET, please do pop something in the Q&A there. And it's something that we will be working on more, I think, as time goes by. So the last kind of presentation, let's get this up, there we go, is really focusing on how to run a MET process. So one of the things that we developed over the last few years was some best practices in using the MET. As I mentioned, we put these into a handbook that was published, I think it was in 2016. You can still download the handbook, but it is now obviously a little bit out of date because of the new MET that we're producing. So we're working at the moment on an updated version of the handbook, which will be out soon. But the key chapter on explaining the MET is already up in a Word version on that Protected Planet site. And we also pulled together these best practices in a paper in Parks, which is the IUCN WCPA journal. And actually, maybe, I don't know, Marc, if you'd be able to put a link in to that paper, that might be useful. So I'm going to run through fairly briefly these best practices, but you can find them in full in that paper and also in the handbook. So a lot of the things around the best practices come from, as I say, some 20 years of using the MET around the world. So the first thing is really carefully plan the MET implementation. If you're going to use the tool, think about how you're going to use it, really familiarize yourself with the tool itself, think about the implementation process. As Nigel was saying in just a moment ago, that generally it's filled in by staff or people working at the protected area or managing the protected area, whether that's a privately managed protected area or a government protected area or a community, but getting together and putting together the MET and the answers. But you can still involve communities or wider stakeholders, either by discussing results or by talking to them about key issues before completing the MET. And as we say now in the evidence base, we specifically have a section on whether it's a community evidence or traditional knowledge, etc. And do allow enough time to complete the assessment in full. I think Duncan was saying that it took him and Carly about 8 hours, which was pretty quick, actually. Well done. It's bound to take a little bit longer, either the first time that you do the MET or now for everybody using the new Excel MET. So allow enough time to fill it in properly and to complete the full assessment. And as Nigel was saying, we really hope with the Excel that will encourage people to complete the entire assessment, which leads us really to the second best practice about doing it properly and do it all. We have seen quite a lot of METs over the years, and some of them really were filled in, just the score, no explanation, no next practice, no practices that needed to be done to improve management in the future. So just the score really wasn't very useful. So again, with the Excel, you're going to have to complete all of the information, but it really is the narrative sections, the why you gave a certain score and what you're going to do if actions are needed to improve management. Those are the most important parts of the MET. And also, if it's possible to use any quantitative data to support the assessment, that's great. And hopefully, as I say, we can do more to incorporate things like SMART into completing the MET. There will be in the new MET handbook, when it comes out, a chapter on linking SMART and MET, which is also kind of an exciting development for us. Adaptation and translation. Well, obviously translation is great if you have the funds to do it. Either the whole Excel or maybe just taking the questions and providing a cheat sheet type of translation. In terms of adaptation, it's encouraged, but more in the sense of providing guidance for the MET in the local circumstances. So the picture here is of the work that we did in Bhutan, and we didn't find that we needed to change or adapt the questions very much, but we did need to put a context, a local context onto them, specifically with the threat assessment, where we developed a kind of cheat sheet again for what was seen as a severe assessment in Bhutan's context, and a severe assessment in one country's a severe threat in one country's context may be very different from another country's context. So providing background or local or national context onto the questions really helps people in completing the MET. And particularly if you are doing the MET across multiple sites in a country, it also ensures that people are understanding the question from the same level of understanding, and in something like threats, the same kind of level of threats across an entire country. So providing additional guidance can be useful. We've tried to make the language as simple as possible within the MET to also aid translation. As I've said many times, the MET was designed to repeat the assessment over time to track progress. So we really hope that once you start doing the MET, you'll continue doing it. We heard from Bhutan that they are repeating the MET every 5 years. There's no particular set timeline that you should repeat it. Some people do it every year, some people every other year. But really, it's looking at completing the assessment within a time period where you feel that you can show, hopefully, progress in management, but also pick up any problems in management. A lot of people do management effectiveness assessments linked with revisions of management plans, for example, when it's quite a useful exercise to link with developing new or renewing a management plan. So consult and get consensus, and I think this links back to, again, questions about how to involve wider stakeholders and rights holders in the MET, and goes back to the idea of planning how you do the assessment. So there are various ways that you can do this. As I said, you can talk to wider stakeholders before you fill in the MET, asking them their opinions on specific questions. And obviously, within the MET, you've got the list of questions, the type of things that you're going to have to respond to within the MET. The other way of doing it is to complete a draft MET and then take key questions out to specific stakeholders and ask for their opinions on management. It's always quite difficult asking for opinions on management. There are many other tools around as well at the moment on social assessment of protected areas. So it's also important that you use the right tool for the right thing. But the MET, it is great if you can involve more people. And one of the things that you'll find on the data sheet at the beginning of the MET is a box that asks how many people have been involved in completing the MET and the type of people that have been involved in completing the MET. And I think it was the GEF that did a study a while ago looking at the validity of the results of MET. And it really correlated with how many people were involved in actually completing the MET. The more opinions that you get, the more people you talk to, the better the results tend to be. Of course, there can then be a matter of building an agreement on MET scores, but that's also a useful process to undertake. So building a capacity and guidance, hopefully webinars like this are helping build the capacity around the MET. And one of the things that we've really tried to do with this new version is to provide more background information on completing the MET and more guidance. And you'll see When you go to download the MET, if you haven't done already, as we said before, there's a guidance chapter. We're loading up sort of videos and webinars that we've been doing, and we'll put this link to this webinar when it's ready up there. So there's much more guidance on completing the MET, which will hopefully, you know, build capacity and make all the METs that we get kind of better in the future. And also, you know, once you've got an understanding of the MET and how it can be better implemented, it also helps ensure the validity of results. I mean, one thing I think Marc, Nigel and I would love to see is a kind of to build a group of people who are interested in the MET, interested in building capacity or being mentors around the world and helping people who want to complete the MET. As I said right at the start, we know that it's been implemented in 2,000 or 3,000 protected areas around the world, but there isn't really a constituency of people at the moment that can help build capacity. And it would be great if we could help do that. And we're certainly reaching out for any ideas around that. We haven't talked much here about verification processes and verifying results. Most people who do the MET, you know, don't do any kind of verification process, but that can be useful, and that can be simply by passing across the results to a few people who know about either the site or the system of protected areas that the MET has been completed with, to get their comments, or again, it could be taking it out to communities to get their thoughts on the results. It's something, the verification of assessment systems is something that we're seeing more and more with standards and things like IUCN's Green List, not so much used in management effectiveness, but it might be a useful thing to think about. And finally, implementation, and it shouldn't really be the final thing, it should be the first thing that we talk about. Doing the MET is a process, it's a useful thing to do, but obviously it's using the results to improve management is the whole reason why you're doing it, and to disseminate the results and let people know, you know, what's been going on. Hopefully this new MET, by providing a kind of automated list of actions, which you then build on to make an action plan, will help with turning, you know, what in the past was just a Word document into an actual useful action plan. And once you've got an action plan, then, you know, you can monitor your actions against that. And hopefully also the dashboard will help with the dissemination of results. Although I think, as Duncan pointed out, it's important to think about, you know, who your audience is, and Excel graphs might not always be the best way to present results. But still, hopefully, the new Excel will make the dissemination of results more useful. And finally, I don't know how many people on the call know about this thing called the GD-PAMI, which is the global database on protected area management effectiveness. It's part of the Protected Planet database, which includes the World Database on Protected Areas. At the moment, that database just shows a site name, whether an assessment has taken place, what the methodology was, and the date it was undertaken. It's hoped that in the future, the GD-PAMI can actually contain more information, and maybe even the results. Of course, there's an awful lot of issues that need to be dealt with in terms of agreement that results are made public. But that's something that hopefully we'd like to see build more of over the next few years, of sharing results. And obviously, management effectiveness is a target that's, well, we haven't got the new CBD targets, but anyway, it's usually something that needs to be reported on, how effective sites are. And hopefully the new MET, with its more detailed focus on outputs and outcomes particularly, can help in that, in reporting to the CBD as well. Whoops, so we've just got a little bit more time for some more questions and answers. And I will also just like to say thank you very much to everybody that's been involved in this. And I'll leave up there for a minute the link, although that was also hopefully put on the chat. And we'd just like to thank all of those that helped us put together this new Excel workbook, which Marc, Nigel and I kind of agreed in a moment of madness to do, I think. But I hope it's something that's really useful for everybody, and you appreciate the new and improved MET4. Thanks. So I haven't had a chance to look at the questions, but is there any specific questions that anybody would like to answer? I know that everybody's been answering them. Online.
Yeah, so I might. There's been a number of questions which we have answered around questions of weighting, and also some around sort of adaptation and how you can analyze results. We did talk about that. We have right from the start looked at that. It's complicated when you're dealing with a global tool. But I think so we didn't in the end put a system for weighting in because it really complicates comparing results across sites. And initially the MET was designed with WWF and the World Bank to have a look at assessing effectiveness of sites where they were investing over time. So, but I guess the capacity is there, and particularly in the new Excel 4 tool, the MET4 tool, there's a capacity to write the data off to another Excel file where it could be loaded into a relational database. And so the capacity is there for sites, if they want to weight things, to help them in terms of their adaptive management, to have a look at what's important, then that capacity is there. So we've always taken the view that, you know, it should be adapted and that be able to be adapted, and that's been done in many places. And I think that's a lot of it, the reason behind its success. So sort of that flexibility is still there. I just mentioned now, we will bring it up at the end. When we do the next webinar, I will go in and have a look at a lot of, as well as the functionality of the Excel tool, I'll be looking at a lot of the, particularly the new questions around outcomes in quite a lot of detail. So we'll have a look at what's the nature of the data that you would put in and how does that come out into the dashboard and other things. So there'll be an opportunity to have a look and to dig into the nitty gritty around particularly those new questions.
Thanks, Marc. I'd just like to ask the other presenters if they've got any kind of great thoughts about the MET. I don't know, Duncan, have you got anything that you'd like to add? I know that we made everybody present in 5 minutes, which was quite quick. So maybe I'll ask Duncan, then Detchen, Madhu and Anthony if they've got anything to add.
I don't think I have anything to add, particularly at this point, but it was really good to be able to give feedback on how we used it. That was really useful for us, and we were third parties as well. So I think there's different ways that the MET's used, and it'd be quite interesting to capture how that works going forwards, instead of having managers perhaps of parks fill it out or internal people. To see if there is some way that third parties can be used, see how effective that is. Because one next step that we'd love to be able to take, but we don't have the funding for currently, is to have the managers of the park do the same MET analyses that we did, and then have a look at how our interpretations compare with their interpretations, and find out where exactly the big diversions are in the results, and really focus down on those aspects of it. So it's really interesting and excited to be involved in, and I think there's a lot more to be done, but it's great to see this coming out.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, it was super useful you doing it. I don't know, Detchen, I know you're no longer in Bhutan and doing it, but would you like to say anything about the process or anything?
Yeah, sure. Maybe I can give a little bit of my experience from there. Well, actually, like the conduct of Bhutan MET Plus itself has been a very fascinating journey in Bhutan, because it was the first tailor-made assessment methodology for protected areas in Bhutan. And what was even more interesting was the need to later verify what the forest colleagues had assessed. I mean, it's basically a self-assessment, so there is very high chances that you are likely to be biased in how you assess your own protected areas. So in view of which we found that the external evaluation was very important to verify how these forest colleagues had actually assessed their parks. So that was really an important thing, and I would recommend that all the other colleagues who would pursue on adapting MET to your countries to also, ensure and enforce such an external assessment to be able to, make a very good assessment. And at the same time, with regards to the evaluation, the duration of evaluation, well, I did mention that we kind of endorsed it from the government to say that we are going to do a periodic assessment for every 5 years. Nonetheless, that's at the national level. And we had encouraged that at the park level, you basically would do that annually. So you're kind of tracking, annually how you are kind of progressing towards your conservation goals. And at the country level or at the national level, then the government kind of endorsed to have this conducted for every 5 years. So I think it's really important that at the protected area level, it's needed to have a self-assessment as frequently as possible, but not as frequently as possible to check your timely progress. And then this would kind of also ease your eventual long-term or short-term conservation goals checking. So with this, I'd like to thank everyone here then.
Thanks so much, Declan. And Madhu, Anthony, I don't know if you wanted to add a little bit. I can see, Mark, you've got your hand up. I'll come back to you. But Madhu, anything more on?
Yes, very quickly, Sue, thanks for the opportunity for us to present our work. It's really excellent to see how MET has grown from strength to strength, and the current version seems very comprehensive, and it's great to see all the new elements, the action plan, the threat assessment and everything. So it's very exciting to see that. And for us, it's also very much an opportunity to link it to elements of SMART, like we presented on, because I think it would provide them, the evidence to strengthen the interpretation of the MET results. So I think it's very exciting to be on this road with you all. Anthony?
Nothing specific. I guess if people are interested in the alignment and how it's going to work in practice, definitely look out for the next handbook and the chapter on SMART, which will have much more detail. But thanks for inviting us.
Thanks so much. Thanks both. So I'm going to hand over to Marc, and I think probably, Marc, you can have the final word, because then Ruchia will just finish off and put an advert up for the next session.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to this question of the internal, external, and audit and the use of information. And this is it's been a major point of discussion in the whole area around management effectiveness. The thing I come back to is I think it's not necessarily a question of quantitative or qualitative data that impacts on credibility and reliability. It's about the quality of the process that you use to collect the information. So you can get good qualitative, reliable qualitative information. You can collect information from people, and you can get quantitative data that doesn't actually tell you anything. So we've got to get the right sort of information, and the link with the SMART tool is one of the ways to do that. The other thing is about the use of it. So there's a lot of experience from evaluation in other areas where if you just do it externally, you may get an independent evaluation, but you tend not to get a lot of use by the people who are being evaluated. So they treat it as an external, like an auditor's report. You respond to it and then you put it away on the shelf. So I think getting a balance of internal and external is really important to both improve credibility, for the managers to learn about the views of other people, and also to get applications. So I don't think it's a one or the other. I think it's about building a good solid process that allows you to bring those two together. And we can talk a bit more about that along the way as we talk through the tool for the next webinar. And I see that Rishi has put that up, so I might just hand over to him to finalise that in terms of the next one. But thanks everyone, and look forward to hopefully seeing you on the next webinar, which will be not so many PowerPoints. It'll be sitting and talking, and we'll be able to take questions as we work our way through the Excel spreadsheet. Thanks.
So thanks everyone for joining us today. Just a reminder that part 2 of this webinar series, as Marc just referred to, will be held a week from today, same time on the 11th of March. I've posted the registration link on Eventbrite in the chat. So please feel free to register there, and you'll receive the link to join the webinar through Eventbrite, as you did with this webinar.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's it. We're done. We've had our 90 minutes. I'd like to thank all of the panelists for recording their presentation and for being here. Obviously, I'd like to thank IUCN and this, although we were kind of forced into doing these vital sites because of the pandemic, I think they've actually been fantastic. I mean, we'd never have had so many people from so many different parts of the world in a room in France, that's for sure. So thank you all for listening to us. I hope it was okay, and I hope that you can all join us next week, I think it is, to follow up. So on that, I think we'll close, and thanks so much, everybody. Wave, goodbye.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.